Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Clint Moody. In this tutorial, I want to show you a quick trick that I figured out for Ableton Live. It's kind of a way to bypass the limitations of send and returns inside of Ableton. So for many of you, you probably already know that when you make a send and return, you're limited to 12 of these. And they're traditionally, in mixing, they're, pretty much always used for parallel effect chains or parallel effect processing. So let's say I've got this kind of demonstration beat here, this kind of generic like pattern. It sounds like this. So if I, for example, wanted to add reverb to this snare, I might do that using a send, where I would have a reverb plugin on the send at 100% wet, and then, or on the return channel rather, and I would turn up the send knob, and it sends some of the signal over here to be reverbed before they're both recombined on the master. And it sounds like this. Right, so I'm adding reverb to the snare this way. The other method was, traditionally, also sometimes people would just drag and drop reverb plugins directly onto the channel, and some people still work that way, and that's fine. This trick, though, is for people that are more interested in just kind of alternate ways of working, I think, and who maybe don't want to use send and returns but still like the parallel effect processing ability that gives. So here's just kind of a quick hack I figured out. So let's say that either you've ran out of send and returns or you don't want to use any more of those. What you can do is you can create a new audio track and group it, and on that group, name the group like it doesn't matter, just put your effect on the group. So for example, reverb, put that on the group and set it to 100% wet, and let's go ahead and name this like reverb. And this audio track over here, it's automatically routing into this group. So what you can do is just have this track listen from the instrument you want to give reverb. So for example, here, our snare, set the monitor to monitor the input, set it to in, and then the fader here becomes like a send control. And so like as I turn up the fader, the signal is going to be sent more into the group, and the group has reverb at 100% wet on it. So that sounds like this, and it's literally the exact same thing as a send and return. And you can do this because of this. Let's go ahead and label this snare. Because of this, what you can do is Ableton allows you to make unlimited amounts of channels. So you could have, one for the hat. You could have literally unlimited amounts of send and returns this way, and if you want a different kind of effect, just make a new group, for like, I don't know, delay or something. So like, I don't know, if I wanted to delay the hat for some reason, I could do that. Just put a delay, maybe like, I don't know, ping pong or something, on the delay track, and just turn up the send. Or, let's switch that over to a snare. And the cool thing about this is that because the signal is being listened to by these channels here post mixer, that means that they're actually still acting as post fader sends. So if I turn down the snare channel here, for example, it's still going to, like, because this channel is lower in volume, not as much is going to be sent over here, which means not as much is going to be delayed. So it's still acting like a post fader send. And I can actually still switch that, which is really, really neat. So for example, just go here underneath this channel going into this delay. I'm going to color this a different color, something more visually contrasting so we can see it easier. And reverb, let's do the same thing to that. We like visual contrast. Visual contrast is very good. Helps organize things a lot easier mentally. So let's say, for example, I wanted to have this pre-fader send. I don't know why, but mixing sometimes demands things like this. So let's say I wanted this snare pre-fader send to this delay, well, then I can just go here and just go post effects. And now it doesn't matter what level the snare fader is at, it's going to be receiving full signal after any effects that would be on this channel before the signal even gets to the fader. And I thought that's really cool too. So for example, if this snare is all the way up, like before rather, if it's post mixer, if the snare is all the way up and I give it some delay. Actually, let's do this. I'm sorry, let's do this on the reverb here. It's probably a little easier to hear. Cool. So there's that, and if I keep playing it and I drag the snare down, it sounds like this. So you can see as I turn the level of the snare higher and higher, more is being sent to this listening channel over here, and that means more signals being sent to the reverb. Therefore, the channel fader of the snare is controlling the amount of effect applied. But if we go the other way, where you have post mixer, you change this to post effects. Now, okay, so I've got our snare with reverb on it, but if I turn the fader down here, the reverb still stays. So basically what you're doing is you're actually like kind of breaking your send and return processing out of this little like world over here to the right, and you're actually able to separate it into groups, which can then be recorded and mixed as faders. So this is a way to work. It's actually a feature on a lot of outlog. That's a lot of live mixers. A lot of digital mixing boards have the ability to have your sends on fader, and analog boards too, I suppose. So it's a really cool feature, and it's used a lot in live scenarios with monitors and things. But one of my favorite tricks about this, and one of my favorite reasons that this might be useful, would be the fact that, for example, this reverb here, because you're breaking this out into multiple channels, what this actually allows is you to have different, like for example on this reverb, you can actually have one reverb unit, but use multiple instruments can have their own individual pre-delay using track delays. And that just has to do with how Ableton processes the order of operations for CPU threads and things like this. You can read more about that on the Ableton website. If you Google like Ableton multi-core CPU support or something like that, you should be able to pull it up. But basically what happens is Ableton prioritizes traditional send and returns over here last in order. So like if you go to, for example, like use a traditional send and return, and you have, you're sending some snare to a reverb unit over here on the right, and then you want to record the output of this return, like send the audio to somewhere, like a new track or something. The output is actually going to be like, it won't be in time. At least in my experience, it hasn't been in time, and that's because the processing order of operations is that the returns are actually processed last. And so if you're going, the last thing that gets processed is coming back into the signal path, like it's kind of making a loop. So it delays the signal a little bit, and it's not really the best way to work. But if you wanted to print your reverbs, that's how you'd have to either do that, or when you go to export or whatever, you would have to select your return chains or whatever. But either way, the point is that you can actually bypass that limitation by doing routing this way. And another really cool feature is that you can, like I said, have one instrument or multiple instruments have independent pre-delay per one reverb unit. So here I've just got one reverb unit on this group. Let's go ahead and delete this and color this one to make it visually contrasting. There we go. And so on our pink reverb here, it's got a pre-delay time of 0.5 millisecond, which is really, really quick, like stupid quick. That's basically no pre-delay, and that's actually going to act like a plate reverb. To compensate for this 0.5 millisecond, because it can't be instant, what I'm going to do is actually just delay this this whole track by 0.5. So now there is 0 pre-delay, technically, mathematically speaking. we're compensating for this little half a millisecond down here by delaying this half a millisecond. And so now what I can do is I can actually introduce another track delay over here on the snare. So let's say that the snare sounds really good with a pre-delay of like, I don't know, 60 milliseconds. Well, then I can just set that up here, and now we can get a unique sound. So the signal is actually, like the copy of this snare signal is being delayed before it goes into this reverb unit. So it sounds like this. And if I, tweak this even more, that's cool. So I've got like 112 millisecond pre-delay time for just the snare. But let's say that I wanted to send the hi-hat to the same reverb, but the hi-hat just happened to sound really good at, I don't know, 20 milliseconds of pre-delay. Like I can actually have the hat sit a little further back in the room. It's actually kind of intuitive, like this pre-delay trick. But like for example, if you have a vocal and you want to have a fair amount of reverb on it, but you don't want the reverb to wash out the initial attack of the words and things like this, you would use a pre-delay so that the reverb sound doesn't come in until later, after the word has been spoken. And it kind of gives the sense that the room is larger, but it's also creating the separation between the reverb and the vocal itself. So pre-delay is really important. And let's say that my hi-hat, I wanted it to be kind of washed out. Well, I'd use a shorter pre-delay for that. And the snare, I don't want it to sound as washed out. I want it to sit a little bit forward. So I'd give it a longer pre-delay. And so it's a really effective trick. I mean, I've never seen anyone else talk about this, and I thought it was at least worth sharing. So if anybody has any questions or finds any creative uses for this, I'd love to hear about them. So leave me a comment or send me a message or whatever. If you liked the video, thumbs up. If you loved it, subscribe. And if not, let me know in the comments. Either way, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.